Hello, everyone. Welcome to our presentation on the primacy effect of emotions in social stories, user engagement behaviors with breast cancer narratives on Facebook. I am Xinyan Zhao from UNC at Chapel Hill. You can call me Eva. I am presenting our research on behalf of Xiaohui, Zexing, and Rong, who are all my collaborators. First, the background of our research. Breast cancer has been the most prevalent cancer and the leading cause of deaths globally. To address this problem, narrative communication has been proposed as a promising means in order to meet public health objectives related to cancer prevention, control, and survivorship. Emerging digital technologies bring opportunities for creating and sharing emotional, engaging stories. Yet, most studies in narrative communication still focus on narratives on traditional mediums such as print ads or television. So it is not well known how cancer stories are told on social media in order to engage the audience. There are two important perspectives that can be used to explain the roles of emotions in narrative communication. First is a static approach to emotions. Two important points related to the static approach. First, there are two dimensions of emotions, which are valence and activation. For example, anger is a high activation emotion with negative valence, but sadness is like a low activation emotion with negative valence. And the second important point here is about discrete emotions, which include fear, anger, sadness, hope, and joy in our context of cancer communication. Discrete emotions are based on people's cognitive appraisals of the situation. The second important perspective here is a dynamic perspective. It's also called emotional flow hypothesis, because it concerns the shifts of emotions in a narrative and their impacts on message attention and processing. Emotional shifts can include those from negative to positive, such as from fear to hope, or from one positive emotion to another, such as from hope to joy. So the sequence of emotions matters on the platform of Facebook, which is our context in our study, as Facebook enforced a CMOR function that truncates text at 480 characters. In general, through a process called negativity bias, negative emotions as compared to no emotions or positive emotions are anticipated to better attract users' attention in a crowded media environment and promote more focused processing of social media messages, thereby leading to a high level of user interactions. Meanwhile, research on cancer support communities, mostly on Twitter, also suggests that users engage more with tweets with positive emotions such as joy and hope than those with no emotions at all, according to Wang and Wei in 2020. In sum, we argue that narratives with both negative and positive emotions should be helpful in attracting users' attention in the social media environment and thus increase user engagement behaviors. And then about the role of emotional shifts in affecting engagement behaviors. According to the emotional flow hypothesis, based on Narby 2015, stories featuring emotional shifts can secure people's attention and motivate them to keep up with the plot. However, there has been mixed empirical evidence on whether the shift of emotional valence can affect narrative engagement and persuasive outcomes. For example, Fitzgerald et al. In 2020 found that a negative positive shift of emotional valence elicited more positive emotions in the audience. But the authors did not find any effect of this negative to positive emotional flow on other outcomes such as narrative engagement, cognitive reactions, and helping behavioral intentions. So based on our literature review, we propose several hypotheses and research questions related to the effects of both emotions and emotional flows on engagement outcomes, including emotional reactions and commenting behaviors. Then about our method. First, a list of breast cancer nonprofit organizations were identified by reviewing relevant literature. We then select the top 5 organizations based on their number of followers and then script all their posts. In addition, the top 10% of the posts rank by the number of interactions were also selected and coded for narratives. Eventually, 419 narrative posts were selected and used for further analysis. We conducted automated emotion analysis. So the text of the posts were cleaned based on standard cleaning procedures. And then we applied a lexicon-based approach in order to automatically measure sentiment and emotions. Namely, we use the NRC lexicon. And we customize this lexicon in the context of breast cancer so that the accuracy rate will be higher in our project. So we try different strategies to detect the number of emotional shifts in a post, such as an entropy-based approach or N-word division. So based on the results, we identify the prevalence of just one emotional shift in the Facebook post in the first half and the latter half of the story. And this is why we evenly divided the post into 2 segments and calculated the average sentiments and emotions in each part in order to compute the emotional shift. Here are our results regarding the engagement outcomes of emotional shift patterns. We found that neutral and positive emotional shift were the 2 most popular emotional shifts in narrative posts online, which account for about 2/3 of the posts we examined. However, the engagement impacts show that Facebook stories with the negative shifts actually receive more engagement in terms of emotional reactions and comments, followed by Facebook narratives of negative to positive posts. We further used negative binomial regression in order to test the role of both emotions and emotional shifts in audience engagement. We found that negative sentiments in the first half of the story were positively related to both emotional reactions and commenting behaviors, while sentiments in the latter part of the post has no effect at all. So for the effects of emotional shifts, we found that compared to stories with neutral stories with a positive to negative shift receive fewer emotional reactions and fewer comments. Stories with a positive to positive shift also receive significantly fewer emotional reactions as compared to neutral posts. Last, anger in the initial position of a story was significantly related to a higher volume of engagement, while joy in the initial position of a story was negatively related to the number of comments. Let's discuss our results here. First, our result shows that the more negative a story was in the initial part, the more emotional reactions and comments the story had. So this means social stories started with a negative emotions, draw people's attention to the content, potentially due to the negativity bias. The emotional flow literature emphasized the sequence of emotions, particularly emotions toward the end of the story. But our results show that platform affordances could alter the sequential effect of emotions in narrative posts on Facebook, because right now we see a dominant effect of emotions in the initial position. And second, anger in the initial position of a story increased audience engagement behavior. This is potentially because anger involves higher intensity and higher arousal, which likely increase people's tendency to approach the issue by engaging with the post. In the context of breast cancer survivors, a story might depict one's anger towards breast cancer by describing how the person fights against cancer in order to protect his or her health. And Third, Facebook narrative posts starting with a positive valence as compared to those with a neutral tone led to fewer comments and emotional reactions. Similarly, a shift from one negative emotion, such as anger, to another, such as sadness, led to stronger emotional reactions and more comments. So if we look at the two pieces of finding together, we can conclude that the position of emotions is more important than the actual shift of emotions in a story in the context of Facebook narrative posts, potentially due to the affordances of Facebook. Thank you very much for listening to our presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or email me at ezhao@unc.edu. Thank you very much.